Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Michelle Graff, and I'm the editor-in-chief at National Jeweler. I'm pleased to welcome you to the latest episode of My Next Question, National Jeweler and Jewelers of America's co-branded webinar series. Today, Amanda Gizzi, Lauren DuBritz, Natalie Francisco, and I are here to recap everything we saw and heard at the 2025 Las Vegas shows. Before we get the webinar started, I just want to let attendees know that today's webinar is sponsored by the Gemological Institute of America. Also, if attendees have any questions, we ask you to please put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screens. I'll be back on after the discussion to handle any questions that come in during the session. Today's session is being recorded and will be available on the National Jeweler website this coming Friday. Now, I'll hand it over to Amanda to get started. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. I am so excited to have you all here with us today. If you are lucky enough to be some of the attendees on the webinar who were in Las Vegas, you're probably in recovery mode as much as the four of us on this webinar are. I feel like this year in particular, it felt busier and crazier than ever. I also came back more energized and more excited about the year ahead than I think I have in many years. So we'll definitely talk about that as we dive into some sentiment. Just to give you a sense of what JA was up to at the shows, what Jewelers of America was up to at the shows, we did have a booth at the JCK show, which actually was extremely busy throughout all of the days of the JCK show. So that was really great to see. And then we also had team members out on the show floors at both Couture, Luxury, and then also at JCK, visiting with all of our members, stepping out to see what the latest trends are, uncovering new talent for my style file column for National Jeweler. So we really had a lot of team members and crew on the ground, taking an education, covering it so we could be really well prepared for this conversation for anyone who was not able to be in Las Vegas. Michelle and Natalie, do you want to talk a little bit about what National Jeweler was up to at the shows?
Yes, but first I want to say, Amanda, that you forgot to mention that at the Jewelers of America booth, you had copies of the 2025 State of the Majors, which we heard were just flying off the shelves. Is
We
this
did
true?
indeed. Well, you had some big news, Michelle.
Yes, we also had some big news. We announced our Retailer Hall of Fame inductees for 2025 during the show. So that
Yeah.
was exciting. This year we are inducting Jeffrey Zimmer, Tom Dixon, and Kathy Corey with Days Jewelers in Maine. So it's a great lineup, and that issue will be out in October.
Yeah.
But back to Las Vegas for now.
Congrats to
So
you too.
3 of our 4 team members attended the shows this year, and we cover Couture, Luxury, and JCK. And 3 of us spread out. We go to as many education sessions. We are on the show floor all day. That is from morning till night. We go to as many education sessions, cocktail parties, galas, booths as we can. And I agree with you, Amanda. I thought we were going to get into this, but I was very happy with the energy at both shows this year, but I felt more exhausted than ever when I got home. And I agree. I feel like I'm kind of still recovering.
Natalie, do you want to talk a little bit about your experience at the show?
Yes, I spent a lot of my time, like Michelle was saying, we spend all day on the show floor. So I'm going from booth to booth, talking to designers and brands, just kind of seeing what they're designing new for the year. Are they noticing any trends? Are they noticing any specific like things from buyers? Are they making, like, are they like, having purchases made? Things like that, just kind of looking at what their designs are for the year.
Great. Lauren?
Yeah, so we try to see as many of our Jewelers of America members as we possibly can, and there's quite a few, so it is quite a task. But I love going up to each exhibitor and saying, what is your most popular piece that you've been seeing after, 2 days at the show or whatever? What are people gravitating towards? What are the retailers saying we need to keep these in stock because we can't keep them in stock enough? So I love hearing that, and I love hearing it from both what the designers love to sell, but then also what they're seeing is their most popular piece from retailers.
Yeah, absolutely. That it's always interesting to start to see those trends sort of take shape right in front of your eyes, and whether it's at your you're actually looking for them, so you're a little bit more mindful of the trends, so you start to see them more, or if it's actually these trends really coming through. So we'll definitely dive into what some of those jewelry trends are. But in general, Michelle, I think you mentioned it briefly, sentiment. I think going into the show, there was a little bit of cautious optimism. Obviously, with tariffs, taking over so much of taking up so much space in the industry right now in terms of noise, there were a lot of concerns. But what did you find the general sentiment to be? And all three of you, feel free to jump in.
I'll go ahead and start. I would say the sentiment was exactly the opposite of what I was expecting. I was expecting the show to be kind of quiet and slow. I was expecting the people to be a little cautious. And I found that there was just a great energy this year. I felt like everyone seemed excited and everyone seemed ready to sell, ready to buy. It was the exact opposite of, like I said, it was the exact opposite of what I expected. And it was really, I mean, in terms of energy and mood, I think it's the best show I've been to since before COVID. I will say that. And I don't know if that's because my expectations were low or, if people were just looking for an escape from, the constant stress of the day to day that we experience now. But I just found it to be, I thought it was both shows, JCK and Couture, which obviously are different. I thought they were both really good this year. Now, how that turned out in terms to the organizers, in terms of attendance, and, did every single exhibitor sell as much as they wanted to, I can't speak to that. But as an editor walking from booth to booth, talking to designers, I don't think I encountered one person that said they were having a bad show. So that was my perspective.
Agreed. I heard the same, and I just felt like the show floor was packed all the time. Every booth I tried to go up to had multiple people at it. Everything from education sessions were completely full. The events that we attended were packed. The line just to check in for registration at JCK on Friday was wild. The amount of people that were just there, it was great, and everybody was happy, and nobody, from my perspective at least, seemed to be complaining to be on the line. Everybody was happy to be there, network with one another, and have a positive show.
Yeah, I have to agree too. It was a lot, maybe it is the low expectations that everyone was thinking, like coming in, that it seemed like a really good show in the end. And a lot of it, like some people came a little cautious, but then once they're there, realize, no, you don't need to be as cautious. Everything seems to be going fine at the shows. A lot of people here and a lot of people interested in buying.
Yeah, one of the sentiments that I was hearing from a lot of people is it felt like all the people who typically are there just to be there, to walk around, to see trends, to, just take in the show, all of those people didn't come. So it felt like everybody that was there and on the floor had intention to buy, to purchase, to get in, whether it's to get in before the tariffs, or whatever the reasons were, people were really there to buy, to spend money. And quite frankly, it was great to see the designers show up in such a way that they showed up with new designs, really launching big collections with big themes. There didn't really seem to be a lot of cautious, like, within the designer space either, which was nice. Some years we walk out going, not really anything new this year. But I definitely felt like there was a lot of new products this year
There
at
was
both
an
shows.
explosion of creativity at Couture. It was phenomenal. Natalie has the difficult task of picking her favorite pieces from all the new collections. And honestly, it was so much that we're making it a two-part series. The first part went up today, and the second part is going to go up next week. But it was hard. Natalie, I don't want to speak for you, but I'm assuming it was hard to narrow it down.
Still so many more pieces I would want to have added, but I can't have 100-part series. But I
I'd
wish I
stick
could.
around for it, Natalie, for what it's worth.
I don't want to edit it. Sorry.
Well, let's talk about those trends a little bit. It sounds like, overall, definitely a great sentiment. It definitely felt like it was going to be a growth year versus a recovery year. That's something that I think is important. It's like, yes, there's so much happening in the world, but it doesn't seem to be keeping creativity down, and it certainly isn't keeping retailers from stocking those shelves. So let's talk a little bit about your standout trends. Leaning, really big into like a big trend in general, and then we can dive a little bit more specifics into metals and gemstones and diamonds and also special pieces within collections. But as far as big picture trends are concerned, What did you see as a standout this year? Michelle, I can start with you.
I'm gonna say I think everything tennis is still so hot. Tennis necklaces, tennis bracelets. They're just it's everywhere. Every designer is doing their take on them. They're just hot, 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 and it's continuing. Also, just still, and I think Lenore wrote about this a couple years ago when we got back from Vegas, but tons and tons of animal jewelry and people doing animals in jewelry that I don't see very often. And then also two other things that I don't think have seen as much in recent years, long necklaces, meaning necklaces you can just put on over, no clasp at all, coming down, it'd be the longest of your layering, your stack, if you will. And then also bracelets with no clasps, either just bangles that hook, like go on and then just a little clasp at the back, or wraps. Just I saw a lot of that too, just and a lot of people were telling me, I think I saw Philip at Royal Chain had done a number of those, and he said his customers were asking for their customers for bracelets that were just easy to put on.
Yeah.
Which as a person who lives alone, I completely appreciate. But I thought long necklaces and either wrap bracelets or bangles I thought were big. And I'm also saying just in general, I felt like there were more bracelets in general.
Mm.
And I felt like the last couple years earrings have been really big. And this year I was like, oh, there was a lot more attention paid, I felt like, to bracelets. That's just my perspective.
No, I definitely agree. I felt like there was a lot more bracelets to be had and also necklaces too, but a lot less of standout earring trends with one or two exceptions, which we can talk about.
Yeah.
Natalie, how about you?
I have to say, still seeing a lot of like bold, sculptural, chunky designs. Looking at bracelets, I saw a lot of chunky cuffs, maybe like kind of bubbly, really fitting along the bone of like your wrist and things like that. So like fitting there, chunky chains, big pendants. I also saw, I feel like I'm a broken record, but it's the year of the snake. So it's a lot of snake motifs and they're just kind of everywhere. Like speaking on animals, specifically snakes too.
Yeah.
So then also two-tone, pretty big still, mixing that vintage-y vibe with modern like modern design elements. So just kind of looking back to vintage, but not copying exactly, mixing it. So I think maybe a sculptural piece with something vintagey like two-tone. And then that's kind of what's in trending now. But I've also been seeing a lot of like an uptick in ocean themes. So a lot of pendants made from shells. So things like that, or like coral, like wrapped in gold and now put that on a necklace. So that's something I'm seeing like pick up, and especially marine life motifs too.
Mm.
So that's something to keep your eyes on. And then Michelle, to add to your tennis necklaces note there, I've also been seeing a lot of mixed shapes too.
Yeah. Tennis
Mhm.
necklaces with mixed shapes. That's what I meant by designers like putting their own little
Yeah.
twist on it. I want to add one thing Natalie's ocean comment reminded me of. If you were to ask me for a standout color trend, I would say blue green.
Yeah. Yeah, without question.
Yeah, and
Lauren,
also
what about you?
pieces too.
Standout trends?
I felt like I kept hearing that every piece of jewelry was either retro or inspired by like something from the 80s or the 70s. And there was such a celebration of like the decades. Especially, I feel like a lot of the designers that I spoke with were celebrating anniversaries or, 50 years in business, 100 years in business. And they were doing like decades of like, this is what we did in the 70s, the 80s, and celebrating that. But there was such a return to those styles from the 70s and 80s. Harwell Godfrey, I know, did a great job with that. Um, Speaking of which, she actually had a great key and lock necklaces situation. I felt like I kept seeing that these keys, these locks, some of them were actually able to open the keys. I did see a lot of that going around. And then yes, the creatures, just creatures in general, snakes, of course. I actually thought was interesting was I saw a lot of equestrian jewelry. I don't know if I spoke to a lot of people that loved horses, but I saw the most gorgeous horse pieces from Lionheart. Graziella Gems does great work with the equestrian jewelry. I just saw a ton of it. So it's interesting that a lot of animal themes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
lots and lots of animal themes. One of the big things that we kept hearing was this idea of surprise to have bold gold continuing to be
Yep.
it.
Yep.
I mean, anywhere you went, it was bold gold, bold gold, bold gold. And everyone was like, wait a minute, gold's $3,300 an ounce. Don't shoot me. I don't know what the actual number is today. I didn't look. But with gold prices the way they are, with a lot of skepticism in the market, everyone sort of expected, I think, to be transitioning away at this point, and it's very much the opposite. It's let's go all in because the consumers are still wanting it, asking for it, identify with it, and it's that feeling of luxury in your everyday pieces. So I felt like that was one of the biggest things.
I have a note about that too, if you don't mind me jumping in.
Yeah, please.
I think what's interesting to me is historically, it makes me think back to the recession. So 2008, 2009, everybody abandoned gold, and gold was much less than it is right now. And everybody abandoned gold in favor of silver. Silver was everything. I think that was the creation of the silver promotion service. Perhaps I'm incorrect about that, but that silver was everything that
Right.
in those years. And I thought we'd start to see that now. And I expected two-tone to be a trend going to the shows. And it was not a big trend, but like the starting of more two-tone designs. And I thought in order to cut down on cost, you would see a lot of designers doing 14 karat yellow and then silver. But all the two-tone I would ask, oh, is that silver? And they'd say, no, that's gold, that's white gold. And I was surprised, and I thought the same thing. I interviewed Viviana Langhoff before the show. She's a designer and retailer in Chicago. And she was telling me that apparently there's a lot of conversation on TikTok about gold as an investment and the value of gold. And a lot of her customers have come in interested in purchasing gold jewelry as an investment of sorts, if you will, as a store of value. And I perhaps that's contributing to this, but as I mentioned earlier, Royal Chain, I mean, he said he had a crazy show and it's all 14 karat over there. I mean, they do have
Mhm.
some silver, but it's mostly 14 karat. And I was just shocked at the amount of not just gold and designers still using gold, but making big, heavy designs in gold, even though obviously the price is what, 3,400 an ounce now, around there.
Right around there, yeah.
So yeah, and it's interesting to me because the last time gold went up, everybody abandoned gold in favor of silver, and that the opposite is happening this time, and gold is way more expensive than it was in 2008, 2009.
Yeah, I remember in those days my phone was ringing multiple times a day from reporters wanting to do stories on alternative metals and also how to sell your gold jewelry because prices were high and people were wanting to get rid of their gold and cash in on the gold market. And we really aren't seeing that. Yes, of course, people are going into retail stores and still selling gold, but we're not seeing that flood like we were in those early days. And obviously, gold is so much more expensive now. So people are still really holding on to it as that investment. And I think as the generations have switched and come into their own with Lauren, I think about you telling us a story about your grandma's jewelry and how you never were interested in it, never interested in your grandma's jewelry. And now all of a sudden you're like, wait, maybe I should go back and take a look at that because your taste changed, the styles changed, and suddenly grandma's jewelry is what everybody's wanting to wear, which is,
I mean, it's the story right now. What's old is new again. I mean, that's constantly, it's just always cyclical.
yeah,
Put it something that's going out of trend right now, put it in a jewelry box. 15 years from now, you'll pull it out and it'll look brand new.
yeah. Let's talk about gemstones a little bit. What were you seeing? Is there a standout gemstone? Obviously, you talked about blues and greens, but what gemstones specifically were you seeing as standouts that you expect to be big for the remainder of 2025 and into 2026?
I felt like I saw tourmalines everywhere, and well, the blue-green trend is also going through with that. But specifically watermelon tourmalines, which I was not expecting, I felt was everywhere.
Speaking of
Um,
a cyclical trend,
yeah,
Yes,
had its
exactly.
time, it went away, it's back. Wasn't expecting that to be back. And I know Amanda will point out she loved the moonstone trend that was everywhere. Seemingly everybody had moonstones.
Mhm.
That seemed to be a big one this time.
Was I the only one that saw a lot of turquoise?
I saw it too,
Yeah, no,
specifically Sleeping Beauty.
Yeah.
yes.
It's another one of those like quick to identify, there's a familiarity to it, but it's also that 70s resurgence that we saw so much of that,
I did
that
not see as much jade as I was expecting because I had heard buzz about jade being a trend going into the shows, and I didn't see as much of it as I thought I might, though it is in line, obviously, with the blue-green trend.
I hardly saw any. That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I
But
think definitely some sapphires too. Um, Diamonds. Everybody is going to ask about diamonds, what we're seeing with natural lab. Where was the market in Vegas? Were you hearing a lot? Are you seeing more lab? Are you seeing more natural? What were people talking about?
I think somebody actually before the webinar had asked a question about are lab grown diamonds still hot? Yes, they are. I think lab and natural are still, both have their lanes and they're both selling. And I also think just on a trend note, for diamonds, I think it's fancy shapes, fancy shapes, fancy shapes, fancy shaped side stones, fancy shaped center stones, bezel settings. I mean, I think we're leaning into the engagement ring trends discussion, but bezel settings for diamonds and fancy shapes I thought were big, and they have been big for a while. Interestingly, when I was at the seller booth, they said the same exact thing, and they noticed that they were getting a lot more requests for marquees, and they said it started when Selena Gomez got engaged, and was
Yeah.
that at the earlier this year, at the end of 2024, I can't remember.
It
But
was
they
at
said
the last year.
everybody is asking about marquees, and I kind of laughed because I was saying that, when I started at this job late 2007, jewelers had, diamond dealers had marquees in their safes. They would never bring them out. They couldn't even give them away. They couldn't sell them. Nobody wanted a marquee shaped diamond. People liked round and people like princess cut. And now you see very few princess cut, and it's all about the oval, the pear, and the marquee, and then Cadillac side stones. I mean, just everything fancy shaped. And then, it kind of goes back to the broader trend. And I know this is overkill. People talk about it all the time, but everybody wants something different.
Mhm.
So, everyone's something they perceive to be unique, and I think that's part of it. But that's my thought on diamonds. I don't know if Natalie or Lauren saw anything different.
Now, I kind of feel the same. I also think that there are some designers that are still like, I will only work with natural. And then of course we have the brands that will specialize in lab grown. I feel like in the past we had seen people introducing that focused on natural diamonds, introducing the lab growns. I've seen less of that, or it was more like, let me show you the natural stones. And then we do have this collection of lab growns, but it's not as popular. So it completely depends designer to designer, because we do know that they're up in engagement rings, of course. But yeah, I think that people respect both sides of it. It is what it is. Natural has a space, lab grown has a space.
Yeah, I think one of the best things that can come out of all of these conversations is that there is no right and wrong, and the last thing anybody needs to do in the industry is fight over it, because it just draws even worse attention and looks like we're trying to, push one thing over the other. But I will say in the lab grown space, where I'm starting to see is, the cuts, people having a little bit more fun. I know, Michelle, you had mentioned Stellar before. They have their lab grown diamond letters.
Oh,
Which
yes,
are
yes,
really
those were really
cute.
fun.
Yeah.
So they're just having a little bit more fun. And then I recently just saw an ad for Swarovski's lab grown line, really pushing engagement ring, which I thought was interesting. But they're really pushing not rounds, they're pushing really interesting shapes, like a specialized shield cut, I forget what they call it, in like a blackened gold, and different materials. So it's not just, set in platinum and a round stone. They're just leaning into this really fancy cut shapes. And that market that always loved Swarovski and was okay wearing Swarovski jewelry is now, that's lab is the next progression to that line, which I think is really interesting because it kind of says where the lab grown market is going. It's now that's become the new CZ or the new crystal.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. What did you see from designers talking about their lines? Any differences was there more storytelling? Was it about just the jewelry, or were there a lot of pieces that you saw that had were part of bigger collections that required storytelling a little bit more? Were there any trends that you saw in that space at the show this year? Natalie, I can start with you. You're shaking your head.
So, well, I always see like everything has a story, a lot of these pieces, but I've been seeing, especially at this show, collections designed around previous stories. So Karina Chowdhury was one of the first people to come to mind here. She wrote a children's book herself, which is a published book you can purchase, and then made a collection of the characters in that book, which I believe is the Big Splash Circus.
Yes.
You might remember it from one of our
Underwater, there's your
reels.
underwater.
Yes. And the little starfish character that's riding the unicycle with a wheel that actually spins. So like that's one of them where it's actually modeled after a whole story. And then I believe State Property also has a story that with a collection that goes along with it, and the collection has pieces that reach different motifs or like critical moments within the story. So they're taking it a little literally as well too, like storytelling through pieces, and also now really storytelling with the pieces.
Storytelling of an actual story.
Yes.
Lauren?
Yeah, I think the meaning behind it is more prevalent than ever. I think that it's never just like, here's a beautiful ring. Like, gone are those days. I think that everything has a meaning, whether it's like where they got the stone from and they were inspired by this design. And there's a lot of, maybe a trend, but a lot of like personal messages. So something that only you can see on the inside of your ring or on the reverse side of a necklace. So it's all about the meaning behind all of that, more than just looking at a beautiful piece.
Michelle, did you see any of that happening?
I'm going to talk about this collection later, when we talk about like breakthrough concepts, but I really enjoyed Lauren Harwell Godfrey's 1975, which is a celebration of her 50th birthday. I love the idea of a woman celebrating her age. I love, and it also really resonated with me because I'm in the same age bracket, if you will. And so a lot of and I'm going to talk more about this later, but a lot of the motifs she used in there, spoke to my childhood in the era in which I grew up. So I really appreciated that. And I just thought that was fantastic that she just like, hey, I'm turning 50 this year, and my whole jewelry collection is going to be built around the year 1975. I love that.
Yeah, no, that was a remarkable collection. I mean, the disco ball itself is just like one of the most incredibly made pieces of jewelry you'll ever see. Talk about attention to detail, and being able to tell that story for sure.
The
There
fact
was a
that the
piece,
disco ball actually spins, like it's amazing.
exactly. There was a piece that Kumi had at her booth at the show too that was so sweet. It was like all of these hidden things inside of the heart. So you open up a piece of jewelry and a little, something falls out, and then there's also an inscription inside of it, and it's all based on a larger story. So I think that's a really prevalent thing that we're seeing. It's like, let's build on this concept and be able to not just have a piece of jewelry, but something that has extra special meaning to it for sure. Were there any major differences between the trends that you saw at Couture versus luxury or JCK? Did you see any differences in the trends, or were they all sort of similar but on different scales?
I'd say similar, but on different scales. Like, when I think of when I'm thinking about luxury, I think specifically about Natalie and I went to see Parlay, and
Mhm.
they had great animal jewelry. They're one of the ones that I love, their animal jewelry. But I also love they had made a Saturn pendant with an opal. They had gorgeous opals at their booth, and I love the Saturn pendant. And I was just thinking about how, that's we see a lot of sun, moon, stars jewelry, but I don't see a lot of other planets represented, and I thought that was just really cool. And but no, I wouldn't say there was any great difference to me in the trends anyway. I didn't see, a ton more silver at JCK than I did at Couture, or a big difference in gemstones, but that's just my perspective.
If you want an example of how to do a trade show, I think everybody should take a look at how Parlay does a trade show. I mean, just the way that they market, the way that they have fun, they're doing constant videos, they had themes with their wardrobes. Like, there's just so many fun things that they do that are really cool. So you should definitely follow along and check them out. They were definitely a standout to me at the show for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, if exhibitors have questions about how to generate excitement or get people to the booth, I just take the Parlay blueprint.
Yeah, exactly. Don't copy, come up with your own
Yes,
concepts.
but think of
That goes
something
without saying,
different.
does it not? Yeah. Let's talk, Michelle. You talked about the new direction, breakthrough concepts. Were there any brands, designers, collections that really surprised you with the new direction this year, or breakthrough concepts?
I'll go first
Yeah.
unless Lauren or Natalie wants to. I just wrote down one name here. It's Lauren Harwell Godfrey of Harwell Godfrey. I already mentioned it. In my opinion, I think Lauren is the most creative jewelry designer working today. If you told me somebody was going to make a jewelry collection based on the Afghan that I had slung over the back of my couch in my house in the 1980s, I would have cringed. But she did it. it's called the Granny Squares collection. I think I'm saying it right, but you know, I think Lauren is excellent at taking things that seem like they could be really niche or come out really kitschy and making them elevated, making them elegant, and making them wearable. And I don't think there's anybody doing it better right now. She did, so I mentioned this earlier, she did this whole 1975 collection. She had a disco balls, obviously like a nod to the disco themes of the era. She had the, you know, they call them the granny squares, those Afghans with the different colored squares. She transformed into that into jewelry, which I thought was just incredible. She had those, this was my personal favorite. There were the hotel room keys, you know, that you used to get when you checked into motels, the plastic fobs for the keys. And she had those, and you could get them engraved with different things. And then she did that collection she called Bianca as a nod to Studio 54 and Bianca Jagger with the, and Lauren mentioned this earlier, the bicolored or watermelon tourmaline. And that was a long necklace. And I tried that necklace on. It was just phenomenal. And I just think it's just incredible. And I don't, and Natalie featured that, her Granny Eleanor Squares,
Whereas Eleanor neck.
Granny Squares Eleanor necklace is our piece of the week when we were still in Las Vegas. I don't know. I just don't know what to say. It blew me away of how good
Me
it
too.
was and how, you know, well thought out it was. And it's just amazing to me how she can, you know, get these ideas and like translate them into jewelry without it, like I said, seeming like kitschy or too niche or, you know, I don't know. I think she's amazing. I think she's an incredible talent and she's been such a delight to watch and such an excellent addition to the industry. She's really raised the bar, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree. Absolutely. And just the fact that she sourced all those gemstones in Tucson this year is also remarkable. All those little cabochons and being able to assemble them in the color palettes that she has. We had a fun game standing at her in front of her space, in the For Future Reference salon where we were trying to pick our favorite square. So it's like, all right, which one do you identify with of all of these? Because they were all so different and also special in the, you know, in and of themselves. And then they came together to make this beautiful necklace. So that was really fun.
I mean, I think just altogether, nobody has a better, I mean, Randy Malofsky and For Future Reference has one of the best collective of designers in the industry. It's incredible. The talent she had in her salon this year was off the charts.
Yeah, they all really
They all really blew
were
it up.
standouts in my opinion. Yeah. Yeah, the Retrified collection was great. The Circa,
1700.
yeah, it was also very cool to see all that again with like jewelry with movement and jewelry with purpose. Very cool. Lauren, how about you?
I mean, we saw so many talented designers. I feel like it's hard to even just call out one. But the one that stands out to me was Buddha Mama.
Oh,
I
yeah.
just feel like when you see a Buddha Mama piece, you know it's a Buddha Mama piece. That amazing gold, their enamel work is incredible.
The tangerine enamel.
Oh, it's such a good color, tangerine.
So good.
The branding that matches, they do such a great job with that, and their inspiration is always so meaningful behind it. Talking about designs and where everything comes from. Like they were using the plants, I can't remember the name, but they were using the plants in their backyard of their studio, and they crafted quite a few pieces out of that. I love their booth, I love them, and I just find their work to be incredible.
Natalie, how about you?
Well, my first note that I have so the 1975 collection by Harwell Godfrey. But I also wanted to add that the crochet necklace we were put as piece of the week, but the bracelet won a Couture award for dusting colored gemstones below 40K. So that was nice to see too. But aside from her collection there, I'd say a pretty big standout, which I already mentioned a little bit here, was the Big Splash Circus collection. I just thought it was so fun. And to see she designed pieces for many different price points. So on our reel, we featured the one that's covered in diamonds and gemstones, but then there's also a little scale back of a piece and like mostly in brushed gold. And then if you want an even lower piece from that, just an outline of the character. So it was nice to see really a full collection with something for everyone.
Yeah.
And also just fun pieces in general. Like keep
that's-
everything lighthearted and playful.
And that's Karina Chowdhury, just to call out
Yes.
the designer. I don't know
Yeah.
if you mentioned her name or not.
That little ticket taker with the basket, the popcorn basket that goes
Yes.
up and down, and he has a
Yeah,
whole
they all had
story.
movement too.
Yeah. And she's another great example of someone who really just leans into the theme. And she did stuffed animals. She had stuffed animals made that were about the animals, for each of the characters in the book and the jewelry line. So she really just went all in and leaned into that too, which was great to see. Um, I want to jump back a second and talk about the engagement and wedding space because we sort of brushed over that quickly, talking about the shapes of the diamonds that are popular. But were there any other standout trends that you're seeing in the engagement and weddings? Metals, and have you seen any alternative bands or metals being talked about, especially in the men's market, or any other, just specifically what trends are you seeing in engagement and wedding?
I mean, I think for me, when I think of like the band portion of it, not the diamond necessarily, I think thicker is in right now. And we're gonna talk about this in National Jeweler at the end of the week, but Dua Lipa, the singer, just got engaged and she has a big old cigar band, right, Natalie?
Pretty chunky cigar band.
Yeah, and I think we had kind of Natalie called that out in her engagement ring story earlier this year, but that's been interesting to see because for a while, obviously, it was like very simple, thin band, very simple setting, kind of just a Tiffany setting. So I really see the thicker bands coming in. And I think Stellar for me is a great place to get what the trends are because they serve so many jewelers across the country. And they were talking about how if people do go for a more simple engagement ring, they get the little decorative stacking bands around them, with diamond accents, different shapes, and they kind of add to the ring in that way. And then you can put those on, take them off, like however you're feeling that day. So I saw that was a trend too. But I thought definitely the standout trend for me was thicker bands. And somebody in the comments here is talking about elongated center stones, oval, radiant marquee, and pear. And yeah, we mentioned that earlier. It's definitely all about fancy shapes in the engagement space right now.
Yeah, I was at a booth when one of the retailers stepped up and it was all chunky bands at the booth that they were promoting for engagement rings. And they were like, finally, we don't have all these bands breaking. We're so done with everybody
Yeah.
coming in with these broken engagement rings. So
Yeah, everybody's over the Etsy tiny micro band with the huge center stone for sure.
Which is an absolute jeweler's nightmare.
100%.
And bezel
Um,
settings are back too.
Oh, bezels, yeah.
Bezels and even half bezels too.
right. Yeah, for sure. Um, so let's get away from the trends from the jewelry perspective and talk about consumer behavior trends, retailers. What were you hearing from retailers when you were there? And what were they looking for? And did you see any sort of buying habit shifts when you were at the show? Obviously, we already talked about the fact that it seemed like retailers were really there to buy and are investing in designer collections. Were there any standout trends that you saw? And Lauren, I can sort of start with you in talking to some of our members, is there anything that you saw?
yeah, it's interesting to hear like Stoller, Gabriel and Co. have selling systems. So their selling systems of showing the different settings with their diamonds. Actually, Gabriel and Co. has a new line of, I believe it was enamel bands and like 20 different colors, gorgeous displaying. They said that they're doing really well with retailers because people are actually able to just view all this at once in one easy to sell way, because sometimes it's like, oh, if there's ever a point where it's like go onto the website to find more or go into the designer's website to find more, they lose them. So anything that the retailers can have in their storefront to not lose those people and not send them online is the way to go.
Anybody else hear anything from retailers on what was making their life easy, how they were buying differently?
I didn't talk to that many retailers. I think I talked to more exhibitors, but everybody's saying that people came as we mentioned, they came to buy, they were very decisive. And it had me wondering if a lot of retailers were thinking, we don't know what's going to happen with prices, between the tariffs and like, is gold going to go up more? We don't know what's going to happen with the prices come July, come close to the holiday season. I had the sense that maybe people are like, I'm getting it and I'm buying it and I'm locking it in at this price now. And like more just plain buying and less consignment, more just like, okay, I want this collection. I want these bracelets, these rings, these necklaces. I'm locking this in. I'm getting it now because, I don't know what the price of this is going to be 3 months from now, 6 months from now.
Yes, absolutely. No, that's definitely a big one. Um, Sustainability. I feel like some years sustainability is a hot topic. We see a lot of recycled metals. Obviously, we're still talking about vintage. I think that could sort of fall into this conversation as well. But has sustainability influenced design or purchasing at all more this year or less this year than in years past? Is it something that you heard people talking about more or less?
You know, for me, I think there's always this big question, gap maybe, between how much the industry discusses sustainability and traceability. And then when you talk to retailers, how many customers actually come in and ask, where is this diamond from? How was this made? Is this green, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm always curious, and I don't have the answer to this. I don't know, but I'm always curious, like, there seems to be like one conversation going on in the industry about, consumers all want to know where their diamonds are from, but then retailers, from like one end of the industry, and then retailers at the other end of the industry will say, not one person that comes in my store ever asks me about that. Not that the industry shouldn't be concerned with sustainability, because it's important for everybody right now to be concerned with sustainability. But I think it's interesting. I don't know. That's what I think of when I think of sustainability. Sometimes I think there's a gap between like how much we talk about it in the industry and how much at the end, the end of this, our supply chain, which is the retail store and the customer, how much it actually gets discussed and how much weight it has in the purchasing process. And I don't have the answer to that, but I think it's an interesting discussion to have, and perhaps for a different webinar.
What
But
about
I didn't
traceability?
hear tons of discussion around sustainability, just generally speaking, at the show this year.
What about traceability? Like knowing exactly where stones are coming from, or supply chain transparency, diamond marks. Obviously, Botswana coming out with a new
Yeah.
Botswana mark for their diamonds. Any other key standouts from the show in that space?
I mean, it's definitely like a big thing De Beers is pushing right now, that De Beers is doing their Origin De Beers Group program. And, they kind of soft launched it last year. They're rolling it out wider. I had the chance at the show, actually, just so everyone knows, to interview Al Cook, who's the CEO of De Beers Group. And we talked a bit about, they calling it Origin De Beers Group. And, customers will be able to come into the store and see, this came from this mine, and here are the communities who live around here who benefit from it, and here was its cutting and polishing process and the people that helped in that. They'll be able to, as we like to say, follow the diamond's journey from mine to market. I don't think it's a bad thing, and I think in selling diamonds, it can only help. I don't know if that's the first question people ask when they come in looking for a diamond, but there was also just somebody here in the chat, thank you for that comment, that said, he doesn't hear a lot of questions about it, but he also hears that younger consumers expect it. And I think it's something that the industry needs to do, because every other industry is doing, not every other, but a lot of other industries are doing it, where if you buy organic eggs, oh, here's the farm they came from. And they put, like, the eggs I buy anyway, they put a little flyer about one of their chickens in there. Like, it's very specific. But, and they do it with coffee and all kinds of products. So I don't think it's a bad thing that we do it. I just, but perhaps, perhaps this gentleman is right. Perhaps they do expect it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a perfect way to look at it, is by saying, they might not ask, but they expect that for sure. Let's talk about education a little bit. Someone in the chat just mentioned that education all of Sunday was dedicated to sustainability at the shows in the education space. So what were your biggest trends from education? Did you have a chance to attend education while you were there? Natalie, you were on an amazing panel moderated by myself at the show. What were some of
No
the other
bias
trends
there
that
at
you
all.
what were some of the other trends that you heard from education?
Well, I just noticed that there was well, I guess it kind of goes hand in hand with JCK's theme for the year being decades. So a lot of looking at things based on like each generation, including the panel we were on too.
Yeah, trends by the generations. Yeah, exactly. Lauren, anything that you heard from the education?
I did not personally sit through any of the education, unfortunately, but I have to say that every time I walked by, I couldn't believe the amount of people that were even just standing in the back of the room. Like people are obviously hungry for this. So it's very interesting to see because I think that that is a change from recent years because there was always like some empty seats, but I don't feel like that was the case at all this year.
Yeah, and Couture actually added education this year too. So I know there were, they even talked about tariffs one of the mornings at
Yeah,
8 o'clock in the morning to have, people willing to get down to the trade show floor at 8 a.m.
to
to
talk
talk
about
about tariffs.
tariffs.
Yeah, but it's a hot topic, so it makes
Yeah.
sense.
And
Um,
Sarah, you'd led that panel, and she's just been invaluable to the
yeah,
industry and the work she's done in helping everybody understand the tariffs. I just wanted to give her a shout out there.
absolutely. Yeah,
Um,
no, she's definitely been a rock star in the space.
can I add one thing about education before we move on?
Please.
I attended the natural diamond panel and Lenore, my senior editor, attended the lab grown diamond panel. And the natural diamond panel was exactly what Lauren mentioned. It was standing room only, like standing room only. There were people in the back of the education space. There were people spilling out into the aisles. And I believe Lenore told me the same thing about the lab grown diamond ones. Like if you didn't get there early to these education sessions, you did not get a seat this year. And some years it's not like that. And in fact, I think Couture, now I didn't attend any of the sessions at Couture, so I can't speak to attendance there. I'm speaking of JCK. But Couture's been a kind of been on and off with education over the years. I think attendance has been an issue, but I'm willing to bet, I bet the tariff one was well attended.
Yeah. I'm going to leave lots of time for questions, Michelle. I know a lot of questions have come in, and we had some questions that were submitted before the webinar as well. But just two quick last questions from me before I turn the floor over to you for questions. If you had to sum up this year's show in one word, I guess it can be hyphenated if you need to, but one word, what would it be?
Upbeat.
Natalie?
I was gonna go with playful.
Ah,
Oh, Natalie, I love that.
I would
Lauren?
say momentum. I just feel like it was very optimistic and looking forward.
And my word is definitely the buzzword that I heard probably more during the show than I've ever heard in my entire life, which is newness. Everybody wants to see newness.
Okay.
So that was definitely the big word on that I was hearing throughout the show. Last question is a fun one. What was your favorite moment off the show floor? Did you get to do anything fun that was off the show floor this year? Was it a party, a special event that was hosted? So outside of the show floor hours, but after party, was there anything exciting that happened this year?
Well, I'll plug our JA event. We had our Jewelers of America member meetup. So we hosted the event to celebrate our new class of 20 under 40. So we actually have 40 members in the new program. So we have 20 retailers and 20 suppliers. So they finally were able to meet outside of email communications and just get to celebrate them. And everybody had a great time. We had a lot of fun.
Yeah,
It's an awesome group. If you guys don't know our 20 under 40 list, check them out. The manufacturers and the retail lists are both outstanding, incredible talent across both lists. Sorry, Michelle, go ahead.
oh, we were talking about favorite moments off the show floor.
Yeah.
We actually had the chance at the National Jeweler, the three of us that were there had the chance to actually leave the hotel, which I think is always like a major step. And
Yeah.
we actually went to see the new Cirque du Soleil show at the New York. We live in New York, so I don't know why we did this, but we went to show, it was called Big Apple, I think, Natalie. It's the new Cirque du Soleil show at New York Hotel, and it's New York themed. It was really entertaining. And then I also really enjoyed putting on my pajamas at night and reading my book in bed. That's my favorite moment off the show floor.
I love you, Michelle. That's amazing.
I don't gamble and I'm not a big drinker, so I'm not really cut out for that Vegas nightlife, you know?
I don't know who has time for Vegas nightlife. Oh, Mark
Somebody
Epper
asked
wants to know
what
the name
book.
of your book. Yeah.
Oh, it's a John Krakauer book called Missoula, and I'll just let you Google it because I'm not going to discuss what it's about. And it's in no way relaxing, but it's what I was reading. So I was like, well, this is coming with me. So
All right. I love it. Natalie, how about you?
I want to say mine is the pool. but my one that has to do with the show was going to the Couture Design Awards and seeing a lot of brands from the DA, like the Design Atelier, getting nominated and winning awards this year.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Can I mention something that's nothing to do with well, I guess this is off the show floors, but I wanted to say that one thing that stood out to me besides my, nightly rituals was at the Couture Design Awards, Jamie Books, who's the founder of the brand Mason and Books, won a Couture Design Award for her slingshot ring in the bridal category. And she gave him the most touching and heartfelt speech talk about a story behind a piece of jewelry. She talked about how she designed this ring from her original engagement ring, and how when she started her jewelry company, being a designer saved her like financially and mentally, and how the slingshot was symbolic of, how sometimes in life we have to be pulled back to move forward. And it was really emotional. It was really heartfelt, and it really touched me. And I thought, for me, that was the most kind of memorable off the show floors moment, was her speech at the Couture Design Awards, which is always a fun event.
What was the favorite piece of jewelry that you put on when you were there?
It's a bold question.
Oh, wow.
I don't know. I have to say, I went to Roberto Coin and I tried on the exact moonstone necklace that Dakota Johnson is wearing in their newest campaign, and it is stunning. I look nothing like her in it, but it is stunning in person.
Michelle may or may not love Dakota Johnson, so
Yeah. I saw Dakota Johnson's new movie over the weekend. Discussion for another time. But that's amazing, Lauren. That campaign with her is
So
gorgeous.
good.
So good. Wow. I might mention something that's personal to me and not, because there's kind of two categories in things, like jewelry I tried on that I might actually own one day, and then jewelry that I tried on that I'll never own. So I'm gonna go with jewelry I tried on that I might own that I actually bought for myself. I tried on a diamond tennis necklace at Dana Rebecca Designs, and I've been eyeing this necklace for years, and I bought it. And I love it. I
yay.
can't wait to start wearing it. But I just love that necklace. It just felt like it belonged with me when I tried it on. But
Well, I had two. I had a $1 million emerald necklace from Robert Prokop that I wore that I also bought while I was there.
oh, clearly. Well, you just got a promotion, so you might as well.
But it was amazing. I did not buy it, but it was amazing. And then I also like one piece that was just struck me as soon as I walked past it was Pamela Zamore has a new and forgive me, I can't remember the name of it, but it's almost a donut style necklace. And it's just the way that it's designed is so beautiful with the diamonds across the bottom, and the way that it's just it's like chunky and heavy and just beautiful in all the right ways. It's like that perfect where you throw it on and it's substantial, but you would wear it and live in it every day. So those are like, in addition to, there's like a million. I probably can't just pick one, but we didn't talk about her yet. And I thought she had a great show at the Design Atelier at Couture. So.
I also want to say, I thought Lisa Nick put this barrel bracelet on me, and I thought it was just incredible. Big, thick cuff bracelet, just mixed color barrels with a cum of diamonds sprinkled in. Oh, it was just gorgeous.
Great. Natalie?
She's so lovely too.
Mine, I'm kind of stuck between two here. So one is Francesca Villa has a new Fantasia collection, and there's little pendants, which I thought was interesting. They're made of gold and titanium, but the inside of the little pendant is a ladybug. Well, there's different ones with different animals, but a ladybug that dances around. I thought that was really fun and very Francesca Villa. But Bejewels also over in the DA, this is their first year, and their bolo tie was at the front of our DA coverage. And so I thought I should see it in person, and it is even more amazing in person. But she has rings with that same like center pendant that you can twist in any way and put on your finger. So I thought it was pretty good.
That's her compass collection, right? Am I correct?
Yes, I believe so.
That's
So
Lisa.
it's a mix of gemstones in there too.
All right. Well, I'm going to turn the floor over to you, Michelle, for some questions.
Okay. Before we move on to the questions, I just want to say thank you, everyone. That was a really great discussion. And thanks to our sponsor, the Gemological Institute of America. As a reminder, we do have some questions that have come in, but if you want to ask a question, you can still type it in the little Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. I'm going to give people a couple minutes to ask more questions. In the meantime, I just want to say a quick word about our sponsor. This webinar is brought to you by GIA, the Gemological Institute of America, protecting consumers and supporting the global gem and jewelry trade since 1931 through research, education, and laboratory services. Now, let's get started with our listener questions. We had some that came in beforehand and some that were submitted before the webinar and some that have come in during. I'm going to start with one that came in during the webinar. I think it's a really interesting question. From where do you think most trends originate within the jewelry industry? This is an interesting question that I've not really thought that much about. So I would say I think probably a lot of trends start on Instagram, and they start with designers who have a big following, and they start to do something and it kind of snowballs from there. I also think that trends in jewelry, trends in fashion, trends in home decor, everything's kind of cyclical. And I think something that seems, old and tired to one generation, when the new generation comes around, seems new and fresh. You mentioned earlier about before the webinar about Lauren, like looking at her grandmother's jewelry differently. And I think that that's part of it too. Like, it kind of goes out of style. People get tired of seeing it. And you might say like, oh, that's the style my mother wore. But then when it becomes like grandma's style, it becomes new and interesting again. But I think in this day and age, I would say Instagram probably plays a big part in like helping trends to really catch on and reach that kind of like mass point of saturation.
Yeah, I always say that obviously there's a lot of different ways and influences that trends can come from, and you never know what might be that thing. But there's also two very important different differentiators with trends themselves, and that's the micro trends and then a macro trend, and how there can be so many micro trends that are hot for a few seconds, but they don't have staying power. But when you can find a bunch of the micro trends that come together to be one big trend, then that's the ones that you really want to invest in and want to, especially if you're a retailer, you want to lean into. So obviously we're talking within the 70s as a decade for inspiration. It's coming from a lot of different places that those trends are starting to come back. And then there's all these micro trends within the 70s that are going to stay hot, but they won't be, as big or stick around as some that have like multiple trends within that. So yeah, I definitely think that Instagram's a great place to look, but it's all coming from somewhere too. And never underestimate the power of a celebrity engagement ring.
Yeah,
That's
I
what
mean,
kind of like celebrities.
yeah, but who's giving it to them to like, how are they finding it? Like what led Selena Gomez, for example, to a marquee diamond ring,
Right.
like
Yeah.
obviously she made it spread because a lot of people follow her, know her,
Yeah.
she's been around for a long time. She started as a kid in the entertainment industry, but where did that, how did she come upon that and like make that hot? I don't know. It's interesting, but I think it's also just like, it's just cyclical. Things, I mean, how many, Amanda, in our lifetimes, how many different styles of jeans have come in and out?
Yes,
It just, you
absolutely.
go,
Yeah.
this is popular and hot for a while, and then people get tired of it, they cycled out, and then, now this is new and hot. Now we're back to the wide leg jeans, and it was like years and years of skinny jeans. So I don't know. That's a really good question. Thank you for that. I don't know if we really answered it.
It comes from all over the place.
Um, Another question that came in before the webinar was people had asked about any breaking news during the shows. I mean, the biggest piece that comes to me is De Beers in the Beacon program. Just for people who might not know, I think most of our guests probably do, but Beacon refers to these kind of ideas, designs that De Beers would come up with for the whole industry to use to sell diamonds, the right hand ring, the 3-stone ring, and then kind of the most recent one, I don't know if everybody remembers this, but it was mixed reviews for it. We'll say Everlon in 2009 was the last time they introduced this kind of widespread design, design that they want to use to generate specifically now natural diamond sales across the industry. So they introduced these this beacon is called Ombre Desert Diamonds, and it kind of involves looking more at the full color spectrum of natural diamonds, which I think does a couple things. It, for first and foremost, separates natural diamonds from lab grown, which are largely DEF, VS clarity and above, VS1 clarity and above. So that was kind of that from our perspective. That was the story we did when we came back that got the biggest reception. And of course, you also had GIA's announcement about their once again changing their approach to grading lab grown diamonds. Though it should be noted, GIA, I mean, it's a big announcement, it does make a difference, but GIA also, it should be noted, does grade a small percentage of all the lab grown diamonds on the market. But obviously they're a leader and it makes a difference what they say and do. So those, from my perspective, were kind of the two biggest breaking news stories, if you will, from Vegas. I don't know if there's anything I missed or anything else anybody heard that I did not hear.
Yeah, no, I thought those were the big ones for sure. And I thought Natural Diamond Council did a great job with their space and having people talking about natural diamonds and doing fun, interactive. You know, they did a trivia night and they did some talks. So I thought they did a good job. And having the president of Botswana there and being interviewed was also interesting. So I thought that was interesting. Good.
It's the second year in a row that the president of Botswana has attended the show,
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken, because I believe
Different president. Yes.
different president, President Masisi was at the show last year.
Correct.
So it was interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know if we want to, do we want to do one more question?
Let's do one more question and then sadly we'll be out of time, but one more question.
Amanda, do you have one do you want me to get a live one or do you want to use one of the ones that
Get a live one.
All right.
Get a live one.
This is a good one. Someone wants to know, I know you all mentioned that silver didn't make as much of an impact as expected, but were there any silver pieces that stood out to you?
This collar from John Hardy
I was going to say John Hardy.
so good. It was two of them actually. There was one that was a Y shape, and then there was also a tight collar necklace, which I normally don't like, but it was so comfortable and it was flexible, and it was one of those pieces that you could put on and wear and dress up, dress down. But it's still living rent free in my brain. So it's like one of those where it's like, oh, that was a good one.
Yeah,
and their wrap bracelet was also that same flexible. It was just amazing.
I love that wrap bracelet too. And I was thinking when somebody said standout silver pieces, John Hardy was the first. My visit to that booth was the first thing that came to my mind.
Yeah.
Well, we're at time today. So thanks again to our sponsor, GIA, and everyone for joining us today. My next question is going to go on summer break. We will take a short break from doing webinars during July and August, and we're going to return in September with an episode about a step-by-step guide to using TikTok and Instagram Reels. Thanks again for joining us today, everyone, and please take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.